he rides a Maserati. He drives a Maserati, which was compensation from the San Antonio police force because the cop T-boned him.
Oh.
So he got a Maserati. I said, you're an E7 with a Maserati? Are you kidding me?
Every time I hear Maserati, I think of that song. My Maserati.
Going to 85. Yeah.
79 variances on this one. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
We have 5. Want to wait a couple minutes?
Three absence.
No, we can store it and get some of the stuff. Let's okay.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I thought, I'm just here confirming what I thought I was
Yeah.
thinking as well. But I didn't want to say maybe something had changed.
The meeting will please come to order. Adequate notice of this meeting has been required by the Open Public Meeting Act. Has been that on January 19, 2023, a copy of the notice specifying the date, time, and location was posted on the bulletin board outside of Borough Hall, mailed, faxed, or emailed to the Courier News, given to the clerk administrator, and put on the borough website. If any member believes that this meeting is being held in violation of the Open Public Meeting Act, please state your views at this time. These proceedings are of judicial nature. Proper judicial decorum will be followed. Only those items on the agenda will be discussed. Next item, roll call, please.
Chairman Bannon?
Here.
Mr. Allett? Ms. Carpenter?
Here.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Here.
Mr. O'Neill? Mr. Vidinsky? Mr. Flores?
Here.
Mr. Alvarez?
Here.
Mr. Daniels?
Would someone move that the absences be recorded as excused, please?
So moved.
Moved. Second. All in favor? Okay. Next item, pledge.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next item will be the minutes, approval of the minutes. Okay, you move the minutes, someone want to second them?
Second.
Move the second, all in favor? Aye. Carried. Next item, resolutions. Any resolutions? None? Okay, we're gonna hold up for now. We only have 5 members.
And we have not heard anything from Mr. Daniels?
South Florida. We're supposed to go in probably, I think in October. Yes, it is. If Tara had not been living here, oh yeah, we've had a timeshare there since '87.
There's Weston Avenue.
The only problem I have with Florida is you never like Angel. Hurricane Andrew. There was a Yankees Florida. There was a place where they studied. And Andrew, they went a big one's house.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, they're gonna leave that open. And they're gonna block it.
Seen you in a long time.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, I stopped working about 10 years ago. That's why I was really
Good evening, everyone.
Hey,
Oh, the Red Sox.
How are you? Good.
All right.
I can't wait to talk.
So we're neighbors, and I don't know you, I'm Heather.
Dave, I'll have to go over here. See you.
Okay. We're on the corner.
You're beautiful. Kenny. I feel bad. I thought it would really
Yeah.
For D1, that's a very, very simple.
Yeah.
Usually, I tell people they want D1, that's what I like.
Yes.
Yeah, no, he's.
It's a lot.
Mr. O'Neill, Mr. Podimski's really enjoyed the first order.
I like what
There's one light that shines out at
Well, that's pretty informative. If everybody were here, we have eight, so, in other words, except. Really on us, it's funny.
That's what I was saying. Oh, yeah, no, not. That's like, he's a big trash.
I mean, again, that's.
Yeah, but that's on them.
Right, you know, at the end of the day, it's the applicant's option. You have this, certainly share my share over the years is that on a D1, I don't know if I want to take a short report.
Yeah, I know. We talked about that in the past. One time we only had
Me
six
too.
members on it.
Yes.
Oh, I know, I know.
Same kind of-
You know, that's,
same kind of thing.
sometimes you, I've got one right now, where the applicant, warehouse, I'm gonna do this anyway. I took a recess, I took a attorney out. You sure you want to? What's going on?
Yeah. Talking to your son? Good?
Looking good? Feeling good? Yeah.
That's what I.
We started and, you know.
Oh my gosh, I got a choice. He's got a little on the CP300.
No problem.
Hell yeah, yeah. It's so great. Maybe I'll just come back and but you got three.
And I realized.
I thought it was Gallup.
You sent me these things from that.
Yeah, you did. Like I said, you ever didn't get anything?
I'll check on it.
I mean, this is Okay, okay.
Yeah, it's up
Okay.
Line 7.
That makes sense because I've been working with crazy.
Zero
Please give me a moment.
Oh, nice.
Because the experience role, of course, is the beginner's course, but ongoing.
Okay, they used to have an intermediate. Yeah.
I did the intermediate.
Yeah. Now I know I'm getting old. Yeah, my cousin. All big,
You have the new yellow last. Those first 2 years, you're never mind. You're right everywhere.
They are 18.
They're family though.
I think it's like 8. It's like I have like it started going over.
This guy was on the focus. He should be able to get on that.
You said what notice is playing golf?
Okay. Okay, land use application, 73 West End Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Oh, no, serious? Pull a chair up.
My name is John Sullivan. I'm an attorney with the offices of Vescola and Sullivan. I'm actually pinch hitting tonight for Richard Fleischer, so if I misspeak on any issue, please forgive me and feel free to correct me.
You see, we only have 6 members here tonight.
I do. I had the opportunity to speak with the applicant. What we'd like to do tonight is to proceed with the presentation, and then when we get towards the time for a vote, my client would either ask the board to proceed to a vote or to possibly carry the matter till the next month, allow an absent member to review the transcript or listen to the tape, and then have a full board of 7 members vote at that time.
I don't know, we listen to the tape anymore? Or we just go to YouTube?
Oh, you have the transcript.
You have the transcript.
You can certainly read, and that's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
And the applicant is certainly within his rights to request that approach, and transcript is, certified transcripts are available to any board member upon request, so shouldn't be an issue at all.
Okay.
Terrific, thank you.
Commence, I was gonna say, left open, that's fine.
Yeah, just very briefly. The applicant is Blueprint Mental Health and Consulting LLC. It is currently in occupancy and operating the adolescent counseling operation that's been on this site since 2018. The property is located at 73 West End Avenue. It's lot 6, block 129 on your tax map. It's an interior lot, and it's a fully improved lot. It's got a building on it, a garage, drive aisle, parking lot, completely improved. And the application before you tonight is to continue the current use of the property, and then add in the possibility of doing some group therapy sessions on occasion. And in terms of physical changes to the site, we're talking about on one side of the building, you'll see there's a 2-level porch. We're talking about enclosing in that porch and to convert that area into additional counseling rooms. So we would be adding 2 counseling rooms. In addition, the garage is not used at all at this point in time. for any reason. And what they would like to do is convert the garage into a usable, what we're gonna call flex space. It's gonna be one large open room. If there were group therapy sessions, which there may be on occasion, we would use it for that. Otherwise, it could be used for, related administrative use, meetings with the therapists, amongst the internal staff and things like that. We are asking for site plan approval and variance approval. Mr. Cole had identified in his report that we do require a use variance because therapy sessions, and in particular group therapy sessions, are not necessarily a permitted use in the zone. And we do need a couple of bulk variances, mostly for pre-existing conditions, but we are increasing the impervious coverage by maybe 1.5%, give or take on the lot. We're also proposing to close off the rear entrance that goes on to Cayman Place. Right now, we're kind of a through lot. They've had problems in the past with people using, non-customers, non-employees using it as a cut through. They'd like to eliminate that, and that helps us to reconfigure the parking lot and increase the on-site parking. So that's the proposal before you tonight. We have submitted a few sets of plans. First is the site plan prepared by D'Amico Engineering LLC, last revised April 10th of this year. I believe D'Amico has also submitted drainage calculations, and we've also submitted architectural plans prepared by Total Architecture, dated April 12th of 2022. Our witnesses this evening are John Mopper, he's a representative of the applicant, Corey Fernandez, who is our architect, Deborah D'Amico, who is our engineer, and Henry Hinterstein, who is our professional planner. So if I could, I would start with Mr. Mopper.
Good evening, sir. Please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Sure. It's John Mopper, M-O-P-P-E-R.
Okay. And, feel free to take whatever seats you have. Everybody gets a seat here, so no problem. Counsel, your witness, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Mopper, what is your position with the applicant?
I am a co-owner with my wife, Michelle. This is
And could you just briefly describe the business of the applicant?
Sure. So we're an outpatient mental health counseling practice that specializes in children, teens, young adults, and what we call now adulting adults, like folks that are actually out there with careers and families and whatnot. We do primarily individual counseling that takes place usually in 45 to 50-minute sessions. We treat folks that are struggling with depression, anxiety, a lot of family conflict, and especially since COVID, there's been a huge mental health need, and I'll be honest, we've been kind of overrun with folks that are seeking support. So that's basically what we do is outpatient counseling.
Okay, and you've operated this site, I believe, since 2018, is that correct?
That is correct, 2018.
And in connection with this application, you propose to enclose the 2 porches?
Yes, sir.
And convert those to use as counseling rooms?
Yes.
And how many, in the main building, how many counseling rooms do you have right now?
So we currently have 6 rooms that we're able to use.
Okay, and this would then create 8 rooms?
It would give us 8 rooms, yes.
And then you want to convert the garage to what I've labeled as flexible use space. But maybe you can explain to the board a little more what the use of the garage may be.
I think when we first decided to do it, we weren't 100% sure what we were going to use the space for. We just knew that we could use it. So what we're thinking is, right now, that could be a space that if we have like an open house and we invite folks from the community to come see our practice, that could be a space that maybe we can like hand out some food and things like that. It can also be a space that a therapist taking a break from doing sessions can kind of get away from the office and go sit there, do something along those lines. Or possibly, if they need to do some administrative work, it's additional space for us to use.
And I know you mentioned, business has taken off a bit. Is that kind of the purpose behind making this application?
It is. We really have been overrun with folks that are seeking support, to the point that we have like something like 200 people that are on a wait list to try to get help right now. It's hard to find room with any therapist really these days. So what we've been doing to supplement that is we've been doing a lot of virtual sessions. And it's a good supplement. It worked during COVID, but it's not the same as being in a room with somebody. So having these 2 additional offices would afford us the ability to actually be able to sit down with some of these kids, especially some of the younger guys with like ADD and ADHD. Doing a virtual session with them is near impossible. So to be able to use that room for that space would be great.
I want to talk a little bit about the comparisons in terms of the operation now and whether that will change at all if this application is approved. So why don't we start with hours of operation? What are your current hours of operation?
So it gets a little confusing because a full-time therapist with us works 20 hours a week. And that's doing 20 sessions. They don't do anything else except for their clinical mental health counseling. So our hours currently are technically from about, I say, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday. But that doesn't mean that every therapist is there at the same time. So I might have one person that comes in and does a 10 to 2. Another person might be doing a 12 to 5. Someone else might be doing a 3 to 8. So it's not like everyone is there at one time. But our basic operations are 10 to 8, but with those schedules being staggered throughout that day.
Okay, and you mentioned Monday to Friday. Are there any weekend hours?
We no longer do weekend hours, no.
And if this application were approved, would the hours of operation change at all?
No.
Let's talk about number of employees. So let's split that into, say, staffers versus therapists. How many do you have now?
So we have a total of 13 therapists, right? I don't know.
10 and 1 provisional.
Yeah, well, it's 13 that are going to be, they're fewer pre-licensed, they're going to get licensed once they go through the state, like their application is through. So let's call it 13 and then 1 support staff. Those 13 therapists then, like I said, work. Some of them are part-time, where they only do about 8 hours a week, and they have a full-time job as, let's say, like a school counselor. The full-time folks are, like I said, about there for 20 hours a week, so they might do 4 sessions a day, 5 days a week, because non-stop sessions in psychotherapy world, it's exhausting, so it's usually a shorter day for most folks.
And do you expect the number of employees or therapists to change at all if this application is approved?
No, negative. We have no plans of adding anyone else to our team at this point. The space that we're trying to acquire is to be able to fully accommodate the team that we have now. We don't plan on adding anyone else to it.
And does your business require any deliveries, loading, unloading?
No, not usually. I get a water delivery every couple of months, that's about it.
And how do you handle refuse and recycling?
Just like everyone else in town, we got 1 garbage can, 1 recycling can that we put out once a week or once every 2 weeks.
I wanted to discuss a little bit the issue of parking on site. So we are proposing a total of 18 spaces now.
Yes.
And so, you know, I understand that, you know, the therapists and the employees are part-time, they're going to be staggered hours. Is that going to also be true with regard to patients coming? They're going to also be those staggered hours?
Sure. So like some clinicians might do, like I said, 12 to 4, but there's some folks that schedule on a half hour as well. So we don't really, to be totally honest with you, we don't have a lot of traffic that comes through our parking lot. You know, I even took a picture today because it was stressing me out that there weren't enough cars in the parking lot actually today. You know, it's pretty quiet.
And I don't know if you're able to do this given the way the schedule is set up, but are you able to tell the board, you know, what might be the average number of vehicles on site between employees and patients, and then perhaps, you know, the maximum that you've ever seen there?
So I would say that on average, at peak time, when it's like, you know, 5 o'clock during the week, I see probably 8 to 10 cars in the parking lot on average. The absolute max, and this would mean all the planets aligning, and I've yet to see this happen, if we had 8 therapists all working at exactly the same time, and all of their clients came at the same time and drove themselves and chose to park in lot, because a lot of times the parents will drop their kids off and go shopping around town and do something like that. But if all of them came at one time, the most amount of cars that we could ever possibly have in our parking lot is 16. And I'm sorry, but that's because our support staff person comes early. She works more like a 9 to 1. So she's not usually here.
What was that number again?
Total max 16.
The 16, okay.
And if parking ever became an issue on the site, is that something you could resolve through scheduling?
100%. Yeah, I mean, we could offset that schedule a little bit more.
I think I already know the answer to the question based on what you told me, but have you had any parking issues in the past?
No, not at all. And just to note, 2 of those spaces that are currently listed are our 2 garage spaces. We don't use the garage for parking. And so even without using those 2 spaces, we've never had someone come in and be like, I couldn't find a parking spot. It just never has happened, ever.
And you don't anticipate any issues in the future?
No, it wasn't even possible.
How would group sessions factor into this?
I wish I never put group sessions down when I originally applied, because it's such a small portion of our practice. We haven't run a mental health group since, I think, 2019 or 2020. When we do run them, we do it like maybe seasonally, and our groups are usually, I think the last group had three attendees there, and what happens then is that there'll be 2 therapists that will be running that group. We have a facilitator and a co-facilitator. So those 2 therapists are now not seeing individual clients during that time. So the parking almost stays the same if you have like 3 folks that are coming through the group. But we had a hard time catching traction with the groups, honestly. So we don't really do them all that often, to be honest.
And you also propose as part of this application to close off the driveway access to Kenyon Place?
Yes. It's unfortunate, I understand, but a lot of folks will use that as a cut through to get to West End Avenue or vice versa. And we treat children as young as 5 years old. So you have young kids, you have families that are coming to a parking lot, and there are people that are cutting through. So closing that off would, I think, be best for safety. We tried putting up signs and whatnot, it doesn't work, unfortunately. But for the safety, and then that also then helps us accommodate those parking spaces.
Okay, Mr. Cole raised in his report that because we might be closing off Kenyon Place, does that create a problem with the one-way, with the 1 car width driveway in and out from West End Avenue? So I understand there's a portico share there. So when you're driving from West End Avenue up to the portico share, there's only room for 1 car, correct?
Correct.
And then when you get past the portico share, there's room for at least 2 cars.
Yes.
So if there's a car coming in, there would be room for a car that was going to be leaving to pull over before the portico share to let that vehicle move.
Yeah, it's happened to me, I think, twice in the 5 years that we've been in the building that, I'm on the way out and someone was coming in, and I drive a Suburban, which is a fairly large vehicle. There's enough room where that driveway widens to pull over and let that person pass by and then get back out into the driveway. But again, it's very rare, I think, that ever really happens.
And what was the prior use of this property before you took it over in 2018?
It was owned by Dr. Susan Rowley, who happened to be a psychiatrist. And she then rented the individual offices in that building to outpatient therapists, but all different outpatient practices. And actually, that's since, I think, 1995 she owned the property. When we bought the property, there were 8 offices being used at that time, because we turned 1 office into one of our waiting rooms, so that eliminated 1. And then they had a walk-in closet that they were actually using for an advanced practice nurse to use. that would make it 8. So they had 8 folks there doing what we do before we even purchased the building.
And I just wanted you to address a couple of the items in Mr. Cole's report. First was item A, items 6 and 7, a comment about repaving the entire lot and replacing curbs.
I would love to. I really would. If you saw the aesthetics of the inside of our building, we put a lot of pride into how our building presents. That being said, we had to take out a construction loan to get this work done. It's cost us a significant amount of money at this point just to apply and go through this process with this whole team behind me here. We just can't afford it right now. But if we get these 2 offices up and running and the practice picks up a little bit, it would be something I'd love to do in the future. I want the place to look great.
And there was a question about whether or not the HVAC system is being upgraded in connection with this application.
To accommodate the 2 additional offices. Well, we weren't going to upgrade the actual system. We were going to extend it into the system that we have to reach those 2 back offices. My HVAC guy did say that I'm probably going to have to put a new AC system in there probably the next couple of years though.
And then there's a comment about some areas of the sidewalk being unlevel and they should be reset.
Is it along the street or?
Yeah, it's the public sidewalk.
It's something I'm happy to take a look at, for sure. Yeah. Anybody at fault?
And then there was a question as to whether there were split utilities in the building.
There are. There's a unit upstairs and a unit downstairs. I think that was from when they were renting the spaces separately.
And then a question as to whether there was any other business operating in the building other than yours.
Yep, definitely not.
I think that's all I have for Mr. Mucker.
Okay. Thank you.
Hold on.
Hold on.
Sorry.
Does anybody from the board have any questions of Mr. Mopper's testimony?
Sir, I do have a question about the number of rooms. I believe in Mike's report, you come up with the number 11.
There's, on the plans, architectural plans, right now it shows 4 on the first floor and 5 upstairs. A total of 9 existing plus 2, so it would be 11. No, that's not, I'm picking up on Morgan said, I think you're saying there's not 9 existing offices. I'm just labeled as therapy rooms.
Yeah, I understand. I definitely wouldn't be here if we had not. I don't have the plans in front of me, but on the first floor, we have 2 active offices that are work as therapy rooms. Other than that, there's 2 waiting rooms that we use. So there's 2 active offices, one at the rear of the building, one that is kind of there. Upstairs, we have 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay,
You want me to point it out?
You're just saying that you're saying the first floor, 2 spaces are erroneous and marked as therapy rooms. You're saying the waiting rooms.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so let's see where we are here. So we come in here. This existing therapy room right to your left here, that's our waiting room. This one here in the corner, that's our second waiting room.
Yeah.
Okay, that way sometimes when we did do groups, we would use that room there. This is an office, that is one of our little guy offices. Our leg is in there. And then this is an office here. So those are the only 2 active offices that we're using on that floor.
When you mean the little guy offices, you mean for child?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
And so you don't rent out the individual offices. The business model that you have is they're all your employees.
Yeah.
There, okay.
Why are they here for use? Clarification on that.
The actual ordinance specifically says that group therapy is not permitted. The concern is you get 15, 20, the potential impact of large groups. And that's why I drill down the report, what is a group? I think John is saying it's 3 people potentially, not 15.
But didn't this come before the planning board a couple of years ago to take a look at that? And made a
Came out.
recommendation to allow it?
And after all that, the therapy was allowed, but the concern was the group. having large groups in small parking lots on top of residential areas. No one could define what a group meant. So the concern is, the difference from the error was to prohibit it and let the applicant come here and say what the group is. If it's 3 people, that's one thing. If it's 30, it's, in my opinion, much different.
So he was not gonna convert the garage to a group meeting area, he wouldn't have to come in front of us?
Not for the use.
You would for the use. I think there's an improvement coverage, but I think it'd be in the planning board. It would not be to the Board of Adjustment. It's the D variance that gets them in front of this board. And it goes back, and this was discussed, Mr. Chairman, about 7 years ago. And the concern the planning board, I think the council has, was what exactly is a group? Because the code doesn't say, oh, group is. We don't define what a group is. So the concern was to have a large group in a residential setting with potentially, how do you define a parking lot? So that the concern is maybe the adverse impact on the surrounding area if it was a quote large group. So I think.
If I may?
Yeah.
It would really be clinically inappropriate to have a group that large. It's not, we have codes that we need to work by, and we would never, that's just not going to be effective. We're more of what you consider like a boutique mental health practice. We focus on super high quality clinical care with seasoned clinicians, and there's no way that we would put 10 to 15 kids in a room and try to provide care to them. It just wouldn't be effective. We're not that kind of place.
So exactly what is that garage gonna be used for? I know you said it before, but maybe you can just repeat a little bit more.
Well, it's like I said, like a flex space, that we have this space there that's got AC, it's got electric, it's nice. It could be like, I always wanted to do an open house to invite the community there. So I pictured that we would have the food out on a table for, once a year. Sometimes I would like to do maybe grab a few sets of parents and do like a presentation to them or something like that from time to time. My wife really wants the space. But I don't know how much use we're really going to get out of it. We just figured, instead of having to come back here again and go through this process again, let's try to do it all at once.
Can I?
Not yet. Does anyone else have any questions of Mr. Mopper?
Yeah, currently, is the Common Place exit the common exit for everyone visiting?
I wouldn't say it's the common exit. I think most folks probably exit out to West End. It depends on, we treat folks from Somerville, Bridgewater, Branchburg, the surrounding area, so it really depends on what direction they're going. I would think that is probably not a positive thing for the folks that do live on that road to have additional traffic going through, and that's not necessary.
So you're having people regularly pulling in and then turning around and driving?
Yeah, that's all.
Okay. The layout right now, the angle parking, points people towards not Cayman. That's why I think Debbie's going to get some testimony. She's changing to 90 degrees, so it's more conducive to go the other way. But just so that the board knows, the garage is going to be fully finished. It's going to be sheetrocked, drop lights, and the nano doors are going on. Those are the folding doors, so you can open the whole space out to the outside. So back on Morgan's, when he was going, it's a large area that you could potentially, I don't know about the licensing, potentially put a lot of people in there. And I understand you're saying that's not what you're proposing, but I think that it's a large space. It's a 2-car garage. It's going to be completely finished with a split zone AC. It's going to be nice with the nano doors. You can open up and be inviting to the parking lot.
And I think, Mike, one of the things that you said is if it is approved, that the new owner, whenever that would be 20, 30 years from now, would have to come back in to get the use approved.
The concern is, and we've had this challenge in the past, is if you have 9, let's say they're not waiting with you, convert back to therapy, you have a lot of therapy plus the garage. You could max out. Now, I'm not saying the applicant could, but for a future person could rent them all individually, and you could have an adverse impact on the adjoining residents, headlight glare, hours of operation. So to keep it, what the testimony here is, I have a comment that should the board approve this, and be recorded at the county clerk's office with the conditions, and some caveats from the board want, that if this changes, it has to come back, whoever buys it has to come back to the board to show that the parking lots for what they're proposing. Because it's, if you look at the report, and I'm sure Debbie will get into it, there's no screening of headlight glares, and they're surrounding the property with other parking lots. You can say, what are other parking lots? What are we screening for? The only concern is the residential streets, houses going out the back way. So I question some screening, fencing, or shrubs to keep the headlight glare going into the neighborhood. You can't. But I'm sure I'm jumping the gun a little bit here. I'm sure Debbie will address some of this.
Mr. Mopper, you see an increase, you said you saw an increase because of COVID?
Yes.
What about PTSD from the wars?
Because we originally focused on children, teens, and young adults, we don't get a ton of first responders that come through. I personally spent a lot of time I'm an EMT myself, and I have some hobbies that put me around a lot of law enforcement and whatnot. I'd like to work with those folks in the future personally, but right now, no, I'm not seeing much of that directly in our practice. I think a lot of those folks seek treatment at the
Anyone from the audience have any questions of the testimony just given by Mr. Martin?
Hi, David Lang, 18 Cameron Place. We're your neighbors. I have a colleague whose son uses you, so I know that you're doing good work. I'm concerned that the nano doors open up and it creates a space. If you're doing an open house, you can have 40 or 50 people in there because it can spill out into the parking lot. And if it's a multi-use space, it just seems like a natural for a gathering place. And if I read the notes correctly, if we're short on parking, can the garages be turned into parking? And that way you have those numbers there rather than turning into a space that could become a large gathering space.
Well, the board has to determine the parking demand for this use. He's showing 18, the board has to come up, and that's why we're talking about the reasonable, should the board grant this, conditions to try to ensure there's no impact on the adjoining street residences.
So I guess I'll go back to the nano doors, the purpose of, kind of opening that up so it becomes an indoor-outdoor space.
Yeah, it opens the space up. It's what I think Morgan was getting at. It's a large space.
So an event would be an indoor-outdoor event.
Well, that's the concern. The concern is at least my concern is why I asked these questions was the intensity of use. That's what you're getting at. What's the intensity of use of the space? And that's what I guess we're going to thoroughly vet is, yes, it's a big space. You're saying that no more than 3, but it's a big space. And that's what I think Morgan's concern is. If it's small, I understand the need, but the concern is.
Yeah, he used the term open house.
Yeah.
And open house says more than 3, probably more than 10.
Sure.
And the fact that there are nano doors says indoor, outdoor. So, just an idea of noise. And I know that your parking lot is heavier use in evening hours than they are during the day. So, it just becomes when we're home, they'll be home. Or they'll be there if you do the events.
That's not necessarily true. The nano doors we were putting in there because I think they look kind of cool. And I think it would attract some folks to our practice a little bit more. If we did do an open house, it would be, if we did, and we were there 5 years, we haven't done one yet, and we can do an open house now with our building. We don't need that space to do an open house. I saw it more as almost like a little bit of a spillover if we did do an open house. But that would be, if anything, once a year. And it would be at a time that we'd have to work out that wouldn't be interfering with the clients that we need to see. I'm not planning on hosting any major events in that space. I'm really not. It's something that, like I said, I thought the doors look kind of cool. It would be aesthetically pleasing to the people that are parking their cars and seeing them there. Being able to have it lit up inside and seeing through those nano doors, I thought would look really neat. But we're really serving no intention of throwing any ragers or anything like that at our place and impacting the place, then it would be on an occasion there would be some spillover there, but it's, I really, and the folks that would come would be professionals. The people that come for an open house would be other clinicians and people from other practices that we would refer back and forth from. It would be a professional event. There wouldn't be any alcohol or anything like that. There wouldn't be any loud music. It's really just to kind of showcase our space and the services that we offer to other professionals.
Good.
Thanks.
If I can make a comment, many businesses have open houses, and you would probably have maybe one a year at that most. I think that the neighborhood is protected somewhat because your hours, you stop at 8 o'clock, and you're not open on Saturday and Sunday. No weekends at all. So my question comes back to the use about the number of people on a regular basis, not an open house.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're only going to have 3 people, I don't see a problem with that.
And sir, the 3 people, if we had 3 people, we wouldn't be using that garage space anyway. We would use that second waiting room to accommodate them as we have so far.
Anyone else? Yes.
Harold Woolard, 44 North McDowell Street. My back house, I exit to Cameron Place. So I never got a letter, one. I put my garbage out there, so it's a pickup for my trash. So I am listed as a trash pickup out there, but I never got a letter of this meeting or what was going on here. So I have a question. A reference to the street itself, Cameron Place. The street is very narrow. There's no parking on one side of the street at all. And there's parking is premium on the residential side. I park on that street myself. And we do have, as I said before, parking is a premium. So whenever
Mr. Miller,
there's
is this a
kind of
question?
like,
Is this a question, Mr. Miller, or testimony?
excuse me?
Is this a question or is it testimony?
I'm actually, I have a question. I'm gonna ask a question about
Okay.
the exit out of the parking lot to Cameron Place. There's a driveway coming out of your place, into Cameron Place.
Yes, sir.
So people will be coming up and down Cameron Place, even though you say they're only coming in on West End Avenue maybe. But I'm saying they will be coming in on Cameron Place because everybody wants to use Cameron Place, so it's not as busy as West End Avenue.
If I may, sir,
Yes.
the plans that we're proposing are to actually close off that entrance to Cameron Place, so that will no longer be there.
So that will no longer be there.
Right.
Okay, I guess you answered my question.
We like that too, Harold.
All good, Harold.
We like that too.
All right, then. Okay, I'm done. Thank
Mr.
you.
Miller.
Thank you.
Yes, anyone else have any questions of the testimony just given by Mr. Walker? Yes?
No? Never mind, sorry.
Okay.
Counselor, would you like to testify, because you're part of this application?
I just impulsively raised my hands and then changed my mind a minute.
All right, I just want to make sure now, because.
It's just hard for me not to talk sometimes, but I don't have anything to add. I
All
support
right,
everything you said.
we want to make a full record. If you have testimony to give, you should give it. So, but yeah, it's up to your attorney. I won't step into his territory.
No, I think we're fine. Yeah, so our next witness would be our architect, Corey Fernandez.
Good evening, sir. You solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, so help you God. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Corey Fernandez, Fernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Counsel, your witness.
Yep. Mr. Fernandez, would you state your qualifications for the board, including education, degrees, licenses held, the nature of your practice, and whether you've previously been qualified as an expert before any land use boards?
Yes, So I'm a licensed architect. My license is in good standing. I'm licensed in New Jersey and in New York. I received my education here in the state at NJIT. I have presented in front of other land use boards, including different towns,
Which, name three.
Hillsborough, Summit, and Morrison.
Good. We'll stipulate to his qualifications.
Thank you. And your firm prepared the architectural plans that we've submitted to the board?
Correct.
Hey, could you give the board a description of the buildings as they exist now and what we're proposing to do?
Yes, so the existing building is 2.5-story professional building built circa 1920. And the southern portion of the building has a 2-story covered deck that I believe was constructed at a later date that's unknown. And then within that covered deck is also a flight of covered stairs that goes from the lower level deck to the top level. The existing deck is built over a crawl space with a masonry foundation. The building is currently in operation by Blueprint Mental Health. So the goal of the project is to enclose a large portion of the deck on each level. So on each level, it's about 188 square feet that we are enclosing. And the goal of this new enclosed space would be for added therapy rooms, as the sonographers are testified.
Could you speak up just a little bit, because you're being pushed very quiet?
All right.
Okay. How many
No issue. No issue. All right. So the two new spaces are approximately 188 square foot each, and will be served as therapy spaces. They're going to be constructed similar to the existing therapy spaces, and they'll contain operable windows similar to the rest of the building. So the outside of the new construction will be vinyl siding similar to the existing. The existing roof over the two covered decks will remain completely intact. There's no improvements there. It's in good shape. And there's going to be other minor upgrades to the exterior portion of the building that we're working on, including replacing dilapidated lattice, providing new barge coats on the foundation wall, and replacing the siding. The existing two-car garage is about 450 square feet and will be finished completely to serve as a space that Mr. Moffett was previously testified. Heating and cooling will be provided in the garage via a 2-ton mini split system. The garage doors are planned to be removed and replaced with folding glass doors. Manowal is the manufacturer name of that. They're going to be the same size as the existing garage doors, which I believe are 8 by 7. And then we're adding a new swing door to the garage as well.
So with regard to the improvements, and in particular, Mr. Cole's report speaks to the roof leader discharge. Are you able to address that?
So the part of the house that we're working on, or the building that we're working on, has one existing roof leader coming down. We're not modifying the roof at all. That's remaining intact, so that existing roof leader will be maintained. And the existing drainage pattern will be maintained.
And then there's a question with regard to exterior colors and trim colors.
So the 90% of the existing facade is dark gray vinyl, and then the part that we're working on is white. So we're looking at two options. If we get samples and we can find a nice gray that matches the existing gray, then we're gonna go gray. If it looks like it's not a good match, we're gonna stay with the existing white vinyl. All the windows are gonna be white vinyl windows with white PVC trim.
And that match essentially what's there now.
Correct.
And a question as to access to those two additional rooms.
So currently, there's a hall that goes from the waiting room in front to the existing covered porch in the back. That access will remain. The same front access and rear access will remain as part of the project.
And there was also a question about potential noise levels from the heat pump.
So I did look into that. A 2-ton mini split system can put out 58 decibels of noise. The NJXE code allows for 65 max between the hours of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And it allows for a maximum of 50 between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. But this is 50 at a residential lot line. The closest residential lot line is not the two neighboring properties because they're also designated commercial. It would be the first one on Cannon Place, which is about 127 feet away. And noise traveling 127 feet is going to be significantly below the required decibel.
But is it next door a group home with residential?
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that is a commercial
Mike, can you
designated
close?
space.
And the area is permitted to be residence, so any of those properties, adjoining properties, could be turned into a residence, but they're not a residence right now. So,
Next to us.
yeah, to cut to the chase, you need to provide some documentation that it complies at the closest property line. That would address any future issues with residents or group homes or change of use happening that's permitted within the zone.
Understood.
So I understand what you're saying. The decibels you're saying should attenuate in 15, 20 feet, in my opinion.
Mhm.
And the concern is, I understand no one's there at night, but ACs run at night. So to get it under the night standard would be a very conservative way of doing it to the closest property line.
Understood. I think we can provide documentation.
It gets a little tricky with documentation, so the manufacturer gives it at 7 feet. Sometimes they give you a whole scale that you can go out 15, 20, but sometimes they don't, so.
Yeah. I think we can make good decisions to get as far away from the property line as possible.
Right. Yeah, I obviously not to impact some of the summertime, but I think running at night.
Just to clarify, it's one small unit you can get. It's not a commercial size unit. It's meant for residential,
Right.
small purposes.
Is that it, Mr. Fernandez?
Yes.
Does anybody from the board have any comments on the, or questions of Mr. Fernandez?
So the foundation of the two offices, do you have to do anything with the foundation to support that?
The existing foundation is 8-inch block. It's structurally sound. We're just putting a coat of cement on the outside to clean it up.
That's all, okay. And then what's the foundation in the garage? The floor?
It's slab on grade, 8-inch block. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the board have any questions? Anyone from the audience have any questions of Mr. Fernandez?
Yes, sir. Yes, my name is Steve Johnson. We live at 97 West End Avenue. Been there for 35 years. I have a question.
Can everybody hear Mr. Johnson? I just want to make sure.
Say again?
I said, can everybody hear you? I just want to try to check to make sure. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Will the garage conversion require any restroom facilities? I didn't see that discussed in the poll report. Does it have sanitary?
No.
Sanitary dirty plans for a restroom?
No.
Any water sinks?
No.
Nothing like that?
No.
Okay, that's it for right now. I'll have more questions for testimony.
Anyone else have any questions, Mr. Yes?
Yeah?
Heather McNall Lang, 18 Cannon Place. Our bedroom is the first residential property facing your parking lot, and I'm concerned with lighting. If you can address the lighting issue, because it did say it would dim at night, but it did not say it would go off at night.
We're gonna have our engineer address
Okay.
that. She'll be the next witness.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else?
From my understanding, I just want to ask a question. Is there a residential facility next door to you guys? I mean, a residential facility housing developing disabled population?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanna know, because they would go to sleep at night in the evening and stuff like that. So my question is, we talk about this sound level and all this, would that bother them? I just want to have a question about that.
It would
And
meet
they're also
code.
handicapped.
It would meet code. It would have to meet code.
What was that?
He said it would have to meet the code, the municipal code.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Fernandez.
Our next witness would be our engineer, Deborah D'Amico.
Good evening, ma'am. You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Deborah D'Amico, capital D apostrophe, capital A-M-I-C-O.
Thank you, Ms. D'Amico. Counsel?
Thank you. Mr. D'Amico, would you state your qualifications, please?
We will stipulate that Mr. Nico, she's been appearing before us for a couple of years now, right?
2 years.
Yeah, a couple of years.
Thank you.
So stipulated.
Thank you. Now, you had prepared the site plan drawing that was submitted to the board.
I sure did. Would you like me to go through everything?
Yeah, perhaps if you can kind of describe the site as it exists now and then the proposed site improvement.
Sure, the site is located on the west end of town on West End Avenue, and it extends through to Cameron Place. It is located in the POR zone, which is the professional office residential zone. To the south, Cameron Place is a quiet residential neighborhood. To the east and west, to the west is the group home, which is a new change to that building. To the east is office buildings and both of those buildings have similar size and shape and layout on their lots to the subject property. Not exact, but similar. To the north, across West End Avenue, are two larger multi-office buildings. And beyond that is the Catholic school. Thank you, Immaculate Conception. The parcel is rectangular in shape. It's approximately 65 feet by 250 feet deep. It is developed with a frame office building on the front of the lot, and there is a 12-foot wide macadam driveway that passes under a 10-foot wide porte cochere. Behind the porte cochere and behind the building, there is a 2-car garage and a parking lot. All of that exists. The existing driveway to West End Avenue is currently used as a 2-way driveway. There's no restrictions on that driveway. And most of the clients use that as a 2-way driveway. Not all, but most. The parking lot is paved and curbed. The curb is concrete curb, and it is in good shape. Not new, but it's in good shape. And it's been there since, in its current configuration, since at least, I was checking historic aerials, at least the 80s. It appears to have been repaved or surfaced a couple of times. And it's in really, really, really good shape. Again, not new, but it's sound. There are currently 14 striped angled parking spaces and 2 spaces theoretically in the garage. However, that is not used, as John had testified. The site is flat. The drainage splits near the building. The front yard flows towards West End Avenue. The backyard flows overland towards Cameron Place. There is no on-site drainage. The roof leaders discharge to the grass areas. The site is clean, neat, orderly, and in general good repair. There are no wetlands, no transition areas, or streams on the property or nearby. The proposal is to enclose 2 porches, as Corey discussed. We're not expanding the footprint, just enclosing 2 existing porches. The structural improvements increase the parking requirements per the zoning ordinance. And that is why I was called in to maximize parking as best I could with minimal disturbance to the site. Cost is really a concern. The owner also expressed to me a concern that he wanted to close off the driveway to Cameron Place because of the cut-through issue, as he alluded to with children in his parking lot. He really doesn't want that used as a street. So addressing these two issues, parking count and closing off that driveway, became my task. To do this, it is proposed to remove the driveway to Cameron Place and reconfigure all the parking instead of 90 degrees, instead of angled parking to make it 90 degrees. And I was really surprised, pleasantly, to see that the curb was spaced to provide 18-foot spaces and 24 feet in between. So that is a really easy change to make. We have to square up some corners and add a little bit of pavement to do that. But removing that driveway to Cameron Place reduces the impervious and really minimizes things. Additionally, removing that driveway, although this is not a major development as defined by stormwater management regulations, and it doesn't fall under the purview of the DEP regulations, that removal of that driveway allows us to disconnect the parking lot from the street and provide that grass in between. And that's a low impact development, best management practice. That's defined by DEP. So allowing that sheet flow or the shallow concentrated flow across there is a positive from an environmental point of view. Where am I? I lost track of where I was. The parking area between the garage and the building will become a handicap accessible van space. It will be striped and signed as such. There is one space, as noted in Mike's letter, across from what is the garage right now, that won't have a full 24 feet behind that space. However, backing out to go back out to West End Avenue, you're going to be backing towards what is 24 feet. So that maneuver would not be a problem getting in or out of that space. So we would ask for a design waiver on that. There is no restriction currently on the traffic direction of the existing driveway to West End Avenue. And as John talked about, there really is enough room when you're leaving the property to see if somebody's coming in, to pause before going under that porte cochere. I think having the porte cochere really draws attention to what's on the other side, and so you're really paying attention before you make that transition. The other thing is, if somebody's coming into the site, you've already made that transition, you're leaving, there is enough of a shoulder. There's parking on West End Avenue, and there's a generous shoulder that is most of the time not used, except for during school hours. That's why I wanted to mention the school. That if there is a conflict, you can have somebody pause and have the traffic, the person leaving the site leave before somebody comes in. So there's definitely a way to mitigate any conflicts in that 12-foot wide driveway. To accommodate the drainage that currently sheet floods and shallow concentrates flow, we will have a curb, a flush curb at the end of the driveway. And Mike had talked about putting in some shrubbery, and we'll do that so that will provide any people who currently cut through a barrier, and it will also provide additional water cleansing for the stormwater, and it will also limit the headlight glare to the homes behind. Traditional subsurface pipe was considered, however, it was found to be less, putting an inlet in the corner and draining out, because there is an inlet on Cameron Place that picks up the flow. It was considered, there were two things that led me away from that. One is the expense of digging everything up and putting a pipe, although HUP is not very expensive, but you have an inlet, it's additional cost. The other thing is that low intensity development, BMP practice, And when you have a pipe below grade, if there's something that goes wrong with that pipe, you're not gonna see it. If there's something that's not draining, people are gonna see that and they're gonna complain and they're gonna fix it. So I always like to see, when it's a small parking lot, to have it drain across the grass like this. For landscaping, there are currently no street trees on the property. So we are proposing 4 street trees, 2 on West End Avenue and 2 at Cannon Place. Bringing the site, and that will bring the site into compliance with the ordinance. There are also 2 site trees proposed near the parking lot. I'd love to propose more, there's just not room between where the existing curb is and the property line. So we did the best we could with introducing trees there. With regard to lighting, there's 2 pole-mounted lights proposed and 2 building-mounted lights proposed. Both of the, all of the lighting is LED lighting. And that will provide adequate lighting for safety and for maneuverability on the lot. I know Mike had talked about reducing them and putting on dimmers for security at night. I would even like to see the 2 pole-mounted lights, even though they're not high. If we could get rid of them at night, I'd have to do an analysis and take a look and make sure that that's adequate for security, and just have the building-mounted lights, the one on the building and the one on the garage, for security, because that would like the security around the buildings, and that's where you really need the security. So that's what I would look at as far as that, and that would protect the residents of Cannon Place. In addition to the shrubbery and the trees, should also mitigate some of the glare that you can get from lighting. That's about all I have.
I just wanted to, if you could just
Yeah.
go a little further in terms of the screening along Cannon Place.
Sure.
I know we talked about some shrubbery. Can you just explain to the board what that might consist of?
So I would look for something that's an evergreen shrub that is fairly dense. And I certainly would work with Mike to make sure that it gives adequate glare for headlights, and that it would be the appropriate height and hardiness in such a location. But it would be a dense, like a boxwood or something that would be dense and evergreen. And the other 2 property lines, the north line, the west line, where the group home is, they have put up a fence. So in addition to, that's not shown on our plans because our survey was done prior, there is a fence along that property line. So that would mitigate both sound and light with regard. And then the east side, the parking spaces head on into other parking spaces.
I think that's all that I have for Ms. David.
Does anyone from the board have any questions on the testimony just given by them?
So, question, Mike, does Cayman Place have any flooding issues now?
I'm not aware of them. I question that. They're basically saying they're gonna leave the depressed curves and just pull out 20 feet of asphalt. So it's gonna look like an entrance.
Right.
And maybe the shrubs will stop that. And then during every storm event, you're gonna be going across the grass, shrubbed area. And the soils are silts and clays. And my concern is a mud hole, because it's never gonna dry. And it's gonna go into the catch basin, which it goes right now. But right now, it's all by asphalt. Right now, the whole driveway sheets down through the existing driveway on the Cannon Place into the catch basin.
So the downside would be is if it ends up being a muddy mess.
A muddy mess, and without the shrubs, I think someone would invite people thinking this is a green, you get depressed curves.
Right.
And only 20 feet of grass, drive over it.
Because it's depressed curve
On
on
both
Cayman
sides.
and on
Right,
the parking lot.
it appears to be a driveway in brick because the curves are all depressed, and not full face curves.
Right.
So if you just have grass, anyone could mistakenly think this is just a grass entrance or something. And the problem is the stormwater management's gonna be whipping through that for every storm. And it's not like we're dealing with K5 or really good sand that drains. It's gonna be soft. So if someone motorist would hit that, the concern is you would be sinking up to your axles in the mud. And I think Debbie is trying to address that by saying, I'll kill two birds with one stone. I'll put the shrubs up, which I recommended to stop the glare from the neighborhood. And the shrubs will be a barrier to people not doing that, trying that.
And how about that back grass area? Is there enough room for trees there?
Yeah, I think there's room. You know, I understand what Debbie's trying to do with the best management, I get it, but you're ripping a lot of water through that, through a tight soil. I do have an erosion thing about what's the speed coming through, but I'm sure she could address that. It's just a question of, it's, in my opinion, going to be a maintenance problem forever. Because you landscape through there, it's always going to be wet. Because by design, the water has to go to the old parking lot.
So where's it go? It drains out through the back parking lot to Cayman and it goes.
There's a catch basin on the property line. It goes actually to the west, maybe 50 feet. There's a catch basin right there in Cayman that you'll see on the property line moving to the west. It's right there. So from a maintenance point of view, I understand what Debbie wants. It's only 30 feet of pipe, but a catch basin 30 feet of pipe. And it's not an issue. It's a full-face curbing. And it's a traditional layout. Debbie's trying to employ the BMPs, which definitely advocates for this. Right. But I think in an urban setting, in tight lots, I don't know if this is, I have concerns over the maintenance and the size they have.
And would it be signage or bollards or anything like this would block the thoroughfare? Because you're gonna have raises a whole bunch of other questions. You're gonna have vehicles going through there.
Well, certainly, they're not gonna drive through the shrubbery.
Yeah,
I mean, if we're planting shrubbery, they're not gonna drive.
Well, I know you can't, people do crazy things sometimes, but I'm just wondering if maybe some signage is appropriate, but that's, you know, I'm not a planner or an engineer, but.
There is a sign there that it's a private drive and people still drive through it, so signage is not working now.
Signs are only suggestions.
Yeah.
So is your plan for the shrubbery, is it to go from existing property line to existing property line?
Yeah.
So a full
Right.
line.
So that would.
And it almost seems as if you have enough room where you could do a double planting.
Yeah.
I would definitely stagger them.
Okay.
There's 20 plus feet. You can definitely stagger the line.
I think it's a win-win for Cayman Place.
Yeah.
I mean, eliminate light and traffic.
I mean, I think you're right. There's gonna be a period of time where Google Maps might still direct people to go down the same place.
Yeah.
Until Google Maps gets updated. Figure that
It
out.
takes a while sometimes.
So the issue is, it's a great design, but access out to West End Avenue. And that's a very, very thin driveway. So now you're gonna be putting quite a bit, well, you're gonna put the only exit out to West End Avenue now.
And the people who use the services there generally, I don't wanna say all because I've never been out there and counted them all, but they generally come to West End Avenue because they're going either back to Bridgewater or over to Hillsborough or, so, you know, they know the area, so they wanna go back to West End Avenue, they don't wanna go to Cannon Place to go, unless they have a friend or, you know, a resident.
And Mike, the flooding that is at the bank, this has nothing to do with the flooding, any of the flow is gonna come out of West End Avenue toward the bank.
Now, basically, it's the same runoff you're having today. It's just how it's into the catch basin. That's the only concern. Right now, it shoots through over asphalt, so it's all hardscaped and zips to the catch basin. It's almost the same. Yes, the improvement coverage, the impervious is slightly increasing, but from a flow, I would say it's probably de minimis additional runoff. So it's not going to, in my opinion, contribute any to flooding, Morgan. It's just a question of how it gets there. Typically in grass, most ordinances say you need at least a 2% slope on grass because it holds. In asphalt, you can go to 0.5%. 0.4%, much flatter, because it's gonna move. With grass, it's resistance. So you usually have 2%, and I don't know if there's 2% right there, it might be 2%. So if you have a grass strip that has 1% slope, it's gonna hold water. It's gonna be a bog, because it's gonna have a hard time getting through it, and all that water's gonna go. And the question, you can make the argument, this is a maintenance issue. It shouldn't be the board's concern, the property owner's gonna have to maintain this. And I understand that, it's just a question of, does it drag erosion into Cayman? Are we gonna get debris coming out? Is it grass, and I raised this, you're gonna have to find grass that can handle the velocity. It's like a stream going over there, not all the time, but we have a 10-year storm or something in effect, it's gonna be ripping across that grass and through the shrubs. So you do have a mulch sloping away or some erosion potential. Okay.
Okay, anyone else have any questions of Mr. Miko's presentation?
Yeah, but when people park and go into the office, do they go through the covered front porch? Is that the access point, or do they go through?
No, the access point, I believe, that's an architect question, I believe is in the back of the porch share.
Okay.
There's two sets of steps, one up the back, one up the front. People will go up the back, set of steps, move behind the door.
Anyone from the audience have any questions of the testimony just given by Mr. Miko?
Yes, ma'am.
Heather McNall, Lane, 18 Cannon Place. I questioned the lighting earlier. We are not directly behind the property. We are across the parking lot to the east. And currently the parking lot directly next to us uses motion sensor lighting in the evening time. Could that be considered for your property? Because otherwise it's shining in my bedroom window.
Yeah, we can certainly consider that, and like I said, the overnight hours, I would even turn them off and have the lighting that is on the buildings be the security lighting.
Because there's one light on the building next to you that actually does shine into our.
And those lights are gone. I mean, the two that are above the garage, they're gone.
No, I'm talking the building next to you, to the west. One of those lights does not go off at night and shines in our bedroom, so I'm looking to reduce it as much as possible.
Okay, yep, no, certainly. And if you have a complaint, we can work with it as well.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the audience have any questions of the testimony?
Okay, our next witness would be our planner, Mr. Hinch.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name and spell your last name for the record, sir.
Henry Hinterstein, Hinterstein.
Thank you, sir. Counsel.
Thank you. And would you state your qualification?
Mr. Hinterstein, have you?
You have appeared here as a professional planner several times.
Yeah, okay.
My license is still in good standing.
Oh, still with Sandy? Okay, good. Let's go.
Thank you. You're familiar with the site, the area, and the application?
Yes.
And could you give a brief description of the site and the area?
Yeah, try not to belabor the point. I think Mr. Cole did a great job in, outlining the application in his report.
I'd love to hear
And
that.
Deborah also
We'd really
did.
love to hear that.
So you've heard of the uses that surround the property. Again, the property 7 West End Avenue, known as Block 129, Lot 6. And some of the surrounding uses are multi-family dwellings, single detached dwellings, apartments, the group home, and similar office and office/apartment type buildings, particularly on the same side of West End Avenue as this operation. The application is for converting the existing porches and deck to counseling space, converting the existing 2-car garage also to a flex space as described by the applicant, sort of to be used by support staff, possibly as a counseling space. Subject property lies in the PO-R zoning district, And that does allow for professional offices, clinics of medical doctors, dentists, osteopathic physicians, and other health practitioners, as well as child and youth services, which I thought was interesting. But does not specifically state group counseling is permitted, therefore requiring the D1 use variance, as was pointed out. Again, in granting the relief of the D1 use variance, we have to show or satisfy the positive criteria for the particular suitability of the site. That must be proven along with satisfying the two-pronged negative criteria, which states that relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good, without substantially impairing the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance. I feel this particular site is suited for the group counseling use aspect of the business because, again, it's, as you heard, it's, I don't even know if it's 1% of the use of this business. It's predominantly used for one-on-one counseling services. It's been that way since he started here approximately 5 years ago. He hasn't had a group counseling session, I think, since 2019, I believe was the testimony. So as you can see, it's been years, and he'd like to get into that a little bit more, but it hasn't seemed to have taken traction. No modifications to the existing offices are necessary to accommodate the group counseling. So the same office space that you would use for a one-on-one could easily accommodate, a three-person, two therapist type of group counseling. So I think that lends itself to the particular suitability for the group counseling for this particular site. Nothing regarding the current operations would change, even if there was group counseling here. Still have the same amount of therapists. There would still be no more than 8 therapists on the site at any given time. Actually, when group counseling sessions would be in place, as was testified, 2 therapists would not be giving one-on-one sessions because they would be supporting that group counseling session. So again, there's a lot that goes into that I feel like the operation would continue to sort of seamlessly be able to accommodate that group counseling. The garage and building torch deck areas exist. There's no proposal to increase the footprint of any of the buildings on the site. They're just strictly converting the existing space that exists on the site today. This is one part-time support staff after the renovations. Again, the 8 counselors that will operate at any one given time will be staggered, so there could possibly be 8 counselors at one time, but again, the way the sessions are sort of staggered, the way the counselor shifts are sort of staggered, I believe the applicant has testified that he highly doubts that all the counselors, every counselor having a patient at the same time would occur. But the nice thing is that he has that controllability to stagger shifts and patients even further, and also scheduling counsel sessions at the point of time that is of the least activity in the business. So time in the afternoon, 6 p.m. was the least active point of the business. That could be the time that he could schedule a counseling session. So I think that's an important fact in the particular suitability. Again, the additional parking spaces that could possibly be required as part of this application, we're adding 2 new spaces, but in reality, we're adding 4 surface spaces because the 2 parking spaces in the garage that are being removed from the garage are now being put on the surface. So although those were counted towards parking previously, they really were never used. Garage, residential garage type space is not something that's really conducive to an office setting when you're coming in and out of a practice. So although they're adding a net of 2 spaces, I really feel that the net is 4 because those garage spaces now are going to be on the surface and easily accessible to all the counselors and patients of the practice. So again, that also I think lends itself to the particular suitability and the positive nature of the proposal. West End Avenue also does provide public parking, and although we feel that we satisfy the parking demand for the office space on the site. Public parking is allowed on West End Avenue. That's always another option. If patients do choose to use that, there's nothing that prevents them from also parking on West End Avenue. The practice is such where Mr. Moffett requires his counselors to park in his lot. But again, the public is entitled to use the street, and patients could potentially park out on the street. As far as the negative criteria, I don't believe there'll be any substantial detriment as a result of this application, with the exception, again, of a very occasional group counseling session. The majority use of this building is for one-on-one therapy, which is an allowed use in the building of the zone. The footprint of the building is changing. There's not going to be any really visible changes to the site or to the building that I think are going to be noticeable, with the exception of 2 surface or 4 net surface spaces being added to the property. Again, they're flat. With the addition of the landscaping, I don't see any detriment. If anything, I think it's a positive that the access to Cannon Street or Cannon Place is being eliminated. It's making the parking lot a much more safer space for patients as well as the counselors, with the elimination of the cut-through traffic, the addition of the landscaping that was testified, including the buffer. I think is going to be a net benefit to the surrounding neighborhood, especially the people that live on Cannon Place, due to the fact that the glare of the lights will be eliminated. So I don't believe there'll be any substantial detriment as a result of this. And as far as the zone plan, again, this is a permitted use with the exception of the group aspect of it. As Ms. Roberts said, the groups are very small, approximately 3 in nature. So I don't really see that having a big impact. As Mr. Cole stated, I think the fear was that a group of 10 or 15, and that's just not the case here. These are very small groups, if at all. So I don't feel that there will be any impairment of the zone plan. I also feel that the application will promote several purposes and goals of the municipal land use law, including A, C, D, G, and M. If you'd like, I could reiterate them. You've probably heard them 1,000 times. I don't know if it's necessary, but I think there's a lot of goals in the purposes of planning that are satisfied. As far as the one new bulk variance that's created, it's for the creation of or increase of the improvement coverage, which is approximately 1.4% more than what exists there today. That's really a direct result of the increased surface parking area. With the elimination of the cut-through pavement, the addition or modifications of the existing parking lot, we're talking 1.4%. That equates to approximately 260 square feet, give or take. It's very de minimis in my nature, something that's not going to be discernible. I think that variance could be satisfied under the flexible C2 criteria, in that it's, again, sort of de minimis in nature. I believe that the improvements that are going to go along with the application, as discussed, the increased buffer, shade trees, street trees, the 90-degree parking, I think all of those things are a much better solution than what exists there today. The cut through traffic, it'll be a much safer and I think much improved for the use of the business and as far as the community that exists on Cannon Place. Again, I don't see any negative criteria, any negative or substantial detriments by the new bulk variance that created. And it's 267 square feet. I think it's de minimis in my opinion, and the improvements I think far outweigh any detriments. Again, there were several pre-existing variances that exist at the site. I think they were touched on by Deborah. They exist. I think eliminating them is impractical. Most of them are building or major modifications to the driveway that just aren't practical. And I think when you look at the overall application and the merits, I think in summary that the B1 use variance, the C bulk variances, and all all the existing variants can be looked upon favorably, without any negative or substantial detriment, no impacts, without any impairment.
And the addition of the ADA space on site where there is none now, not only brings us into compliance with law, but can that be viewed as a positive as well?
Of course, yes. Again, ADA requirements for this type of use and this amount of traffic would require one ADA space. And now that we're adding that, I think that brings us into conformance or compatibility with the ADA laws, and I think that's definitely the benefit of the business as well as the surrounding area.
Would be your testimony that, the additional space would essentially advance purpose A of section 2 of the MLUL?
I do.
Just want to clarify that.
Okay. Anyone have any questions of the testimony just given? Anyone from the audience have any questions on the testimony just given?
David Lang, 18 Cannon Place. I'm not sure if it comes in here or there'll be more testimony. I wanted to speak to the aesthetics. We heard about the neighborhood. They've done a great job, or you guys have done a great job at keeping the entrance on West End Avenue to looking residential, the individual. Is there going to be someone talking about that?
Well, I was going to ask, is this a question about the testimony that's been given, or
Well,
if you're going to make a statement, it will be at the end of the application?
I just wanted to know that the doors, are they going to look clinical, industrial that are on the garage, or the garage going to continue to look like kind of a residential, make a residential statement versus an industrial statement? I didn't know whether that was the architect, the planner, or the engineer who would speak to that question.
Questions on the record, so you respond to it, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll ask anybody who can to chime in, but we are replacing the overhead doors with a folding door, so I think it's going to make it a more, maybe a less commercial appearance.
And if I may, with all due respect, that garage doors they don't face Cammon, they don't face West End, they face the engineering building that's next to us, and we're going to be putting shrubs along Cammon. So they're actually, I don't see how you would even see our garage doors.
We're in the house east of the construction.
Yeah, we look down on
We look down on the parking lot.
Yeah.
That's why it's a question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see them looking.
I don't know what nano doors are. That was the reason for my question.
I want them to match our building, we moved into an old Victorian house on purpose, we wanted that kind of aesthetic, so we'll do our best to keep it,
You've done a great job.
Thank
You've
you.
been great neighbors.
I appreciate
I
that, thank you,
definitely-
we tried.
Yeah, no, it's been great. Well, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to talk about it later too.
Okay.
Sure.
And just a question about the doors to follow up with that. Are those all glass panels that you can see in?
Yes.
They are?
Yeah.
So what would you do? Have curtains behind that or privacy blinds of some sort?
Maybe doing like a fog possibly, so that or tinted so that you can't see all the way in.
Right.
But we won't really need too much privacy in that space. It's not like a intensive counseling session where we have to protect our clients. Like I said, it's going to be flex space, so privacy isn't necessarily something that's really.
Right.
And those are 3 folding doors that go to one side or the other?
I believe so, according to.
Yes, so like an accordion. Like an accordion doors.
Okay.
Does that satisfy you, Mr. Lang?
Yes. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions on the testimony just given?
That concludes our presentation of evidence. And if I can have one moment with Mr. Moffett.
John, before you do
comments.
that, you haven't discussed anything about the sanitary sewer comments. I had requested that sewer is original 100 years old to be televised. Debbie, did you touch on that? I just don't remember hearing that.
No, we have no objection to doing that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I had a comment that if it's original terracotta line, that just televise it. If there's documentation that it was replaced in the last 20 years with PVC, I would say there's no need for that because it's glue joint.
Make a condition of approval?
Yeah, I think Debbie's indicated we can do that.
Yeah, it's just to televise, just to see the condition of it, that's all. And just so everybody's aware, it's not borough rules, you might incur a connection fee if the SRDSA feels that the increase of occupancy warrants it, you're gonna get hit with a connection fee for them, for the garage conversion and potentially the offices. It's not a borough fee, I'm just letting you know that it's not under the borough's control at all.
Understood.
Why don't we get into comments from the public?
Sure.
Anyone from the audience have any comments on this application? Sir?
Greg Storms, DGM Management. We own the building, 80 West End Ave, that's directly across the street from you. I would just like to say, I think I'm always encouraged when young people want to invest in a business and want to invest in Somerville and want to grow their business. So I think it's a good thing that even though the site has challenges, the egress, things like that, I would support the application because I think that it's nice to see that young people are going to invest, buy a building, and have a business here in town. So I would support this application.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sir?
Yes, Stephen Johnson, 97 West End Avenue. I have some comments from my wife and myself, but I'll stick to hers. We feel that the conversion of a detached garage to a habitable occupancy is really not appropriate for this neighborhood. With many residential homes on Caney Place and us at 97 West End Avenue, that this is really setting a very, that this approval for a garage conversion sets a very bad precedent for other homeowners in the town to request a variance to possibly convert their garage space to a habitable or living type space. There's issues that we've noticed over the last 6 months with the recently approved plans for King's Daughters, that we've had homeless people walking through our yards, through neighbors' yards. There's been trouble with rats. The developer does not maintain the property. They don't cut the grass. The security of the site has not been secured. There's people wandering around with all the windows were out for almost 7 months. My daughter actually had to cut their grass twice in the summertime because nobody from the borough was stopping by to check and see and make sure everything was secured. The neighbors themselves, the Blueprint Mental Health, seem to be very good neighbors. We have no objection to enclosing the porches, but we do feel that this conversion of the garage to a habitable space is just setting a very, very bad example or precedent for other homeowners to want to do the same thing. Maybe I would like to come and say, hey, can I convert my block garage into a picnic area or some kind of party center? But I would prefer to see the garage stay as it is, existing, or remove it and gain some parking spaces. Now, we may be senior citizens, but we've been living in this home for 35 years, and our children are going to inherit this and they're going to stick around. So it's not like our house is going to be able to be converted unless you're offering to let me enclose my front and back porch, and maybe I can create some other living space in there. But my other concern is, and to be honest, this isn't for the board to address, but it's something that this applicant should consider as well. Is that the construction officials do not seem to be diligent about checking on the properties. Honestly, my daughter took pictures of rats. There was a homeless person who was going to the Fulton Bank, stealing water from their hose. He ended up moving in to the King's Daughters garage because it was open, and I watched the policeman empty 5-gallon plastic buckets of all of his living clothing, utensils, food. I don't know, I've seen him driving around recently. But this morning I had a homeless woman coming through. I was getting ready to leave for work. I was in my car, I didn't even turn it on yet. And I saw this person walking through the yard, stops by our little fish pond, and then continues to walk down my driveway headed toward West End Avenue. I got out of the car, I said, "Excuse me, miss, can I help you?" She walks over to our garbage cans and starts taking the tops off and looking inside. And I said, "I think you need to leave now." So she slowly walked out the driveway and then turned right and headed down toward Blueprint Mental Health in that direction. I'm not saying they stopped at your house, but they definitely, it's a problem. It's a serious problem. The police come in once in a while to check, but the borough inspection agencies need to do a better job checking on the security of the sites to make sure nobody's getting hurt, and that there aren't homeless people that are living in the house while it's under renovation. But the biggest point is, I just don't feel that this garage, that it's appropriate, this garage be converted. It just sets a bad example. Put yourselves in our place as a resident. How would you like it if somebody put in a converted garage in your neighborhood? That's pretty much all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. This board is aware of the problem with the inspections and construction code and code enforcement. We've taken a position, we've been fighting this one now for 2 years. And thank you for your comments, because we'll take these back to the
Developers make a lot of promises. This client turned out to be a great one, that's fine. I just want to make sure that going forward, that the borough does a better job.
I'll take your comments back to the mayor tomorrow.
And Mr. Johnson, so you know, the applicant, the site you're referring to, is coming back to this board for the conversion of the attic. So we will have this application a few months before the board.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
good. Yeah.
Anyone else have any comments?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes.
My concern is, I want to piggyback on Mr. Johnson's statement, is that living in this area here, we do have a lot of mental health and other facilities right in our neighborhood here. At what point do we get to become like oversaturated with these types of facilities being in our neighborhood? Now, I'm concerned because Mr. Johnson is concerned because he lives right next door to me. And I have my wife and my grandchildren come, and we have these homeless people. What's going to say that we don't have mental health people, maybe violent ones, whatever, wandering through the neighborhood? And
that's something this board can't control, Mr. Willard.
well, no, what I'm saying is, sir, is this. I'm not trying to, say anything about these particular nice people that's coming into the neighborhood. What I'm saying is that the population that they're servicing are coming into our homes in our areas. There's another group home right next to it, or down the street from it. There's another one on the corner here by the Borough Hall. There's a place across the street from there on Wooddoor Street. On Wooddoor Street, they do on the corner of West End, that does counseling and everything. So I'm saying is, where do we get to? Where do we get to? And where we live, that this becomes too saturated with these types of facilities in our neighborhood. That's all I want. That was a question. Okay, there should be some law that's saying about how many types of facilities coming into one particular area, but that's the question.
Back in the day, when a group home wanted to go in existence, like the one next to the parking lot going into Immaculate Conception by Mr. Store's building, they would come before our board. They don't do that anymore. They've been declared inherently beneficial uses. We don't even know at times that there's a group home being put there. They don't have to come before us anymore. We are the county seat. We have the county mental health here in town. And 21 towns in this state all face the same problem. This is America. We shouldn't have homeless, but we do. We shouldn't have people with PTSD, but we do. And this is a professional office residential zone. It's allowed. The market's going to say one is enough too much. Enough is enough. We go through this thing that's termed inherently beneficial use. Inherently beneficial use, cell towers. Do we need 50 cell towers in town? I don't know. But then when we deny it, it's up to the courts. Belmar's going through that right now. But with the social services that are offered in this town, because we are the county seat, along with Richard Hall down the street in Bridgewater, when we don't have a mental health problem, we don't need these.
I'll be one of the first to say that mental health problems in America is at an all-time high. We do need places to actually to help people with mental, let's put it psychosis, put it in a proper medical term. The thing is, my concern is this, is that within a block, within one block, we have all this going on. I'm not saying, okay, I don't have any concern with how many, I'll spread it out. Spread it out.
We can't.
So why put it right there in one block? To me, that's my only concern. The thing is that Mr. Johnson, he has people wandering through his yard. They wander past my house. We want to know.
That's not a problem that we can deal with. If you have that problem, call the police.
Yeah, I'd like to know. My concern is to these fine people. What do you have in place as far as the law is concerned for the protection of not only for yourself but for the residents there and other people coming in?
722-0331. If you're having a problem, call the police.
Okay, do you want us to respond to that?
If you can, I'd love to.
When they're coming here, they're in a professional office residential zone. That's where we want them, in the POR and the professional zone, where the doctors, the lawyers, the dentists are. Not in residential zones that are R1 or R2, then we have no zoning. We just have chaos. And I deal with the PTSD. I've got a nephew who's done 3 tours over in Afghanistan and 2 in Poland. He's there right now. I have friends that I direct to a mental health facility that does PTSD on the first Sunday of every month in Bradley Gardens. It's crying shame. Just like you, Mr. Willett, you're a veteran. I work with veterans. I'm the vice commander of our local American Legion. I see it all the time. I see it when somebody slaps the bar.
I'm the chaplain for the Marine Corps League.
I know you are.
So what I'm saying is this, is
we can discuss this all night.
We know each other.
Right.
Well, thank you for your service. The thing is that I'm looking forward to having these people here so they can take some of our veterans in there and help them, because there's a lot of veterans around that need their help. I don't have any problems with them coming in. They're beautiful people. They've been there. They've been wonderful. No problem. And I like them. I think they're good. That's my own take on it.
Thank you, Mr. Willett. Yes.
Yes, and just to follow up on Harold's point, these are very good neighbors, and we're happy to have them here. And we have no objections to the closing the porch. It's the garage issue and the precedent that it sets going forward.
Anyone else have any comments? Yes.
McNally, 18 Cannon Place. I just want to say thank you, because we're very happy with you closing off the driveway to Cannon Place. That's going to reduce traffic on our street, and we really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yes, anyone else? None? Someone move that we close the public portion of this application?
So moved.
Second.
Move and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay.
Yeah, if I may, very briefly, you heard a lot, so I don't want to take too much of your time here. We have a site that's fully improved. It's functioned as a counseling center for many years. Apparently, there have been no real issues. I do like hearing the neighbors say that we're particularly good neighbors, and I think everything you've heard from them and Mr. Moffer indicates that, we're going to continue to be good neighbors, after this. The use is a permitted use with the exception of the group counseling. It's in harmony with the other uses in the area. I think the lot overall is adequate in size to accommodate this use. I think we're okay from a parking standpoint. The bulk variances themselves are relatively minimal and necessary to the operation of the site. The only new bulk variance we're proposing is a very minor increase in the impervious coverage. But I think in terms of the discussion we had on the drainage, it's not going to create any issues here. The use variance is limited at this point to the group counseling. The applicant would like to have that option open, even though it's going to be something rare, and the groups, as he mentioned, are going to be small in size. And we could always agree to a condition, limiting the size of the groups. So, we're not going to have a situation where we're going to bring in these huge groups, create a parking problem, a noise problem, or anything of that nature. Mr. Hinterstein had testified as to the particular suitability, the special reasons, and the fact that he didn't see any real negative impacts here. I think, perhaps maybe two of the main positive reasons are closing off Cannon Place. We did expect that the neighbors would like that, and I think it's a win-win for everybody there. And the addition of the ADA space is also a significant positive. So we would ask you to consider approving the application with the conditions that were noted throughout the evening.
We really didn't have that many conditions. And one that I always recommend is compliance with Michael's report. 12, we had as a discrete condition to televise the sewer conditions. I had suggested, again, I don't want to put pressure on the applicant, but we discussed all these issues with using a portion of your area as a thoroughfare. Perhaps signage should be installed. That was it, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I took pretty extensive notes, so if anybody heard anything to the contrary, please let me know.
And should the board want to approve it, just to condition recording this with detailed instructions, because the use goes with the land, and the testimony is this is going to be a low-intensive use based on what the applicant is doing. 20 years from now, a different therapist can come in and say, what do you mean? The board gave us approval to use all this. And now we have an impact problem if they have a much more intense use.
So the resolution of approval would be recorded with the Somerset County Clerk.
It would be recorded, and there would be Cliff would have to articulate what the intensity is and what the trigger would be to come back to the board in the future. And it had to be recorded, in my opinion, for the notice, because if you don't record it, there's case law that people have no one knows this.
Right.
Because the title search doesn't come up. And they have gone to court and say, we didn't know about this. This is you can't enforce this. And the courts have upheld that. So
No, that's correct.
That's
correct.
the court's reason for recording it.
I'm going to say, I think as a condition of approval, recordation of the resolution with the clerk should be sufficient, because that means it's on notice to all persons who have an interest in the property, including purchasers. So it should not be I would concur that should be a condition of approval.
So when you say record it, might it be on the deed itself?
It gets recorded with the county clerk's office, so when you do a title search, the resolution comes up, it says what the use is, what the approval is, and hopefully what the triggers are.
Well, what the
come back to the board.
What the parameters of the approval are. Now, it's a continuing, in my opinion, increasing trend in connection with approvals, to make sure that the terms and conditions of every development application that is approved are of record. It's not meant to be onerous. It's simply meant to kind of close the circle, if you will, in terms of discoverability. Now, I have one question, because you mentioned it a couple times. What do we want to make in terms of the terms and conditions by which they have to come back?
Well,
because that has not been really discussed overall. But
it would be, the trigger would be worked out with the draft resolutions with the applicant. typically a trigger is if you have, more than this many therapists at the same time, or the use changes are gonna, or something like the applicant is gonna rent the rooms out, the therapy rooms out, or a change of use. You're hearing testimony that this is what we're doing.
Or change of hours.
Change of hours, change of use, change, the scope changes, where we're going to grant therapy like the former applicant did, something of that automatically triggers that the board has to review that proposal in context of the impact on the parking.
Because we are, by granting the use variance, we are approving, if you will, the group therapy issue. I mean, we won't have a lot of control over that unless you want to put a condition of approval in terms of if there are going to be more than, say, sessions exceeding 5, 10, 15 members, the applicant would have to come back for a
expansion.
Yeah. That would be up to the board if they wanted to do that. And so in essence, you would be approving the application, you'd be approving the variance, but you'd be putting limitations on, that issue of group therapy. If that's something that is of concern to the board, you've heard testimony that indicates that there may not be, all that much group therapy. And what exactly the parameters are, I don't know. At one point, we talked that 3 people would be group therapy, and there's other circumstances where the number is larger. So, I mean, I think the board may have to determine what it believes is appropriate. Realistic, too. It would seem to me that if you had, I'm not all that experienced in terms of psychotherapy and the procedures that go with it. It would seem to me that if a group therapy contained, 5 members or more, where you might have to have, people coming and driving and things like that, that might be a threshold. Perhaps the applicant has, can favor us with what its experience has been. I mean, perhaps it's more than 10, perhaps it's more than 15.
Well, I think that we heard testimony that said 3.
That's what they have been. And I would say that going into planning for that group, we said the max was going to be 10. But we haven't had more than 3, or we wouldn't take any more than 10 for it to be clinically appropriate. But we haven't gotten 10 people in the group yet. Not yet.
Group therapy with a limit of 10.
Yes, based on this testimony, yes.
So the garage is 450 square feet.
Sounds right.
And from a code standpoint, safety standpoint.
There's 2.
Because it wouldn't be in the garage.
Excuse me?
We have a room already in our building that doubles as a waiting room and a potential group room that has 15 chairs in it.
Right.
So most of that would probably be happening actually inside the main building, not necessarily in that back garage space.
Well, the limitation, I think, would be on the property in general, not just one room or another. If you're going to have group therapy, you'd have a maximum of 10.
I'm okay with 10.
So now you get into the situation, there's 10, but then we heard testimony that you wouldn't have a regular operation ongoing. Because now we get into a parking area, because 10 with kids means there's 10 cars. So do we put a restriction on you can't have regular office hours during that period of time?
You could do something like that. We would say something like when we sent out the initial emails to the parents, hey guys, just a heads up that we can't accommodate parking, so you have to drop off your folks and come back and pick them up, which most parents usually do. They'll drop off their kids, they'll go do a little shopping in Somerville, pick them up 45 minutes later. This historically is what happens.
My concern is being very clear with this resolution, because about 17 years ago, we were not clear enough in what application. And it became,
I'm going to try.
I'm just saying it became an issue. Right. And for those on the board from 17, that knows what I'm talking about. So I learned my lesson then to be very clear on the conditions when you're having conditions based on parking. The devil's in that detail, is where I'm coming from.
And there's always the off-street, off-site parking, right on the street.
If I may, I'm not sure how this plays a role. Somerset Treatment Services, that's across the street from us. I know they hold regular group therapy sessions there. Is their building slated for group therapy?
I don't know anything before the plan.
I don't know.
I'm just trying to compare to what is already kind of happening around us now.
I mean, contrary, there's been discussion that, doing this is gonna establish a precedent. I have to disagree with that point of view, and the law does too, because each application stands on its own merits. What I'm concerned about is what you're gonna do at this ceremony, at this facility, not compared to what someone else is gonna do. What your operations are going to be. As we all know, we've had issues recently with a lack of clarity in terms of description of operations. I don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
It's an invitation to litigation.
Again, just referencing that we haven't had or ran any group since 2019, 2020. So it's not something that's in our normal run of things, but we're doing 99.9% individual counseling.
I understand that completely. I'm thinking 20 years down the road. So you have retired, you're selling your business, and you're going to operate potentially different. And if that's going to trigger a parking, it has to come back to the board to make sure it still works. That's where I'm coming from. I understand your judgment. You've been very clear. I'm just thinking, he runs with the land, and unfortunately, you're not going to be there forever. At some point, you're going to be selling this, and the other operators might take a different approach, like renting out every therapy room. And that might dramatically increase the parking demand on that facility.
Or having, for example, group therapy sessions in different, several different rooms simultaneously. I mean, I've seen some remarkable interpretation of clauses that are in a resolution as far as an approval is concerned, where things get completely out of control. So, I mean, my recommendation to the chairman, and I'll certainly craft something, but I'm going to say, group therapy with a limit of 10 in one room, in essence, in one room at the facility. And I'll have to draft it accordingly. And I'll make sure that I have the transcript to guide me too. We don't want you doing, I don't want to sound like unfortunately that's my job. We don't want you to have, for example, some successor in interest to you saying, well, we can have group therapy in, 6 of our rooms. So all of a sudden you got 60 parking spaces you got to deal with. You got things like that, and it becomes a disaster. So you've got to keep that in mind, and the board is charged with the responsibility to limit you in that regard. I mean, a use variance is not an unlimited thing, because a use variance in essence is saying an illegal use is now legal. So we have the right to impose any conditions we see fit.
Can we just say maximum number of people on the property at any time?
You could do that too.
And tie that to the parking?
I don't know whether that really is as practical as, the key issue here was group therapy. There was a concern raised as to what it means, what it amounts to, and frankly, what we're gonna have to do is determine how it should be limited. I'm not trying to be, again, heavy with you guys, but I am concerned with that issue.
Yeah, I think what you're driving at is that, we're gonna limit a group to 10, and we shouldn't have 5 separate group sessions going on.
Precisely.
So we can certainly agree that, there would be no more than one group session at a time.
You can't accommodate more than that. It wouldn't work.
Well, I want to be responsive to what we've heard from the members of the interested public. If you were going to have that many people in your facility, and let's assume, again, if someone was dysfunctional and there was a problem, okay? Let's assume, let's take the worst case scenario, you have more than one person who is dysfunctional and could cause problems. I mean, frankly, limiting the scope is protective of the neighbors. I'm not trying to say, listen, I'm not trying to say something inappropriate or unkind. Again, it's the intensity of the use.
I understand, sir. It's just speaking to our clientele. We're dealing with most of these kids that are having a tough time going to school.
Oh, of course.
It's not, we don't have,
completely understand.
it wouldn't be clinically appropriate for us to treat folks that have active suicide ideation, active homicidal ideation, active psychosis. They're gonna go to an intensive outpatient program, they're gonna go to a partial hospitalization program, or unfortunately sometimes a hospitalization. Our level of care is the bottom of the bottom. We're dealing with most of the kids, and guys that are just having a tough time kind of getting through life.
Please understand, I'm very sympathetic. Believe me, it's been, I'm, as I say, I have to walk a very fine line, and as does the board.
So Mike, on the change subject, we're beating this up a little bit. Where's the door to nowhere go on the west side of the building?
It goes nowhere. So as per the fire marshal, he came through, when we bought the building, that was a door to nowhere, and there was no stairs, there's nothing going out there. So as per the fire marshal, we had to put a sign on that door that said this is not an exit. So it's just not used. It's kind of in the back of a closet almost, like a cubby space.
Right.
So it's closed off. We have a curtain that closes off that closet, and it's locked, and it has a sign that says not an exit.
Okay. Yeah. Mike, the next question is maintenance. So the grass area, if it constantly floods out and it's a mud bowl for Cayman Place, who is responsible for cleaning that up?
That's a great question. If it's in the public, well, if it comes from the applicant's lot, it would be the applicant responsible.
Legally, it's their applicant.
And as the board knows, if the board approves a grass strip, the applicant has to maintain that for the indefinite future. That's why I got concerns, because these things, the great intentions, 5-10 years, becomes a problem. But ultimately, none of these conditions sunset. So they would have a requirement to maintain it.
Maintenance runs with the land in perpetuity. So we talk about 10,
That's my
20 years,
concern, is the maintenance.
10,000 years. Really.
So for the public's interest, who is responsible? Is it the DPW in town?
Yes.
That has to clean that up, or is it the applicant that has to clean it up?
The DPW would be called, and then they would have to pursue it with the applicant. Okay. Or an enforcement issue with the applicant. Let's say there's erosion. You have clay, silts and clays going in the street. It would become an enforcement issue ultimately, but initially it would be the borough's responsibility to address it. The borough can't say, oh, we'll get to it, well, we called the applicant and they said it'll be out in weeks. You can't have that.
Yeah.
So that it would initially have to be addressed, in my opinion, by the borough, and then pursued to stop this by enforcement and so on.
Is the applicant aware of that?
I'm aware. We have professional landscapers, Garden State Landscape, that take care of both our business property and also our home property. They take care of any kind of planting or maintenance of the yard. We keep it up really well. If anything like that was happening, I would want that happening on our property.
So you would take care of it?
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
And your successor in interest, because of the recordation of this resolution, would understand that they would carry that responsibility forward. It doesn't end when you sell the property.
I don't know how I can confirm or what the next person's going to do after me. I'm sorry.
No,
Well, it's all right.
we're gonna record it, so they're gonna be on notice that they have to do everything.
That's correct.
Yeah.
My concern would be the flooding, the sheeting in the winter and freezing,
Yeah,
icing.
I mean, I understand the intent, I get what Debbie's saying, but the thing's been working for a million years is a curb and a catch basin. And you don't have these issues, and Debbie's right, you have to maintain a pipe, but it's kind of like the thing that I know works forever. Grass strip, yes, it can work. You can plant the right things and then it will work. But it's a question of what's really the purpose of it all. Are we really filtering anything on 22 feet with the tight soil?
Well, also, once it's broken up or muddied, it's not gonna dry easily at all. It never does.
Okay.
Yeah, we can agree as a condition that, you know, if that does become a maintenance issue, that we could go ahead with Mr. Cole's recommendation that we go with the full curving and we do pipe from the lot into the catch basin. So we can write something up and trigger that if, you know, in the municipality's reasonable determination, if it becomes a problem, you know, we'll go with Mr. Cole's recommendation.
So if the area becomes a maintenance problem,
All right. Guys, we ready to vote?
So a couple of comments.
Yep.
So I think what we've done tonight is we solved the Cayman Place parking issue, access out there. Like good idea about the restricted deed, so the public will be protected there. The lighting issue seems to be resolved. The public is now protected with stated hours, 10 to 8, no Saturday and Sunday. The big issue is that the driveway going in and out, I think it's worked for years. Before the owner, prior to you, it was Dr. Slomka. He was an ophthalmologist, and he didn't have a big practice, but again, it worked back then. You could go out the same way. So I make a recommendation that we approve the use with conditions stated.
It's been moved. Someone want to second it?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Great business. Thank you for being in town.
Roll call, please.
Chairman Dare?
Yes.
Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Flores?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Mr. Daniels?
Yes.
Harry.
I will coordinate the preparation of the resolution with your office, council. I expect to address to the next meeting, but if not, it's already ready.
Terrific. Yeah, I'll ask Mr. Fleischer to get in touch with you and we'll, you know, maybe you guys can work on some of the language.
Well, this is a little bit of a complicated one, so I would maybe, so that'd be fun, I appreciate it.
Well, before Dennis, Mr. Vascola was our board.
Okay, very good, that's what
Before Dennis got on.
that's what I recognize the name, I was gonna ask you. I know Dennis will want to remember you as well. I spoke with him earlier today, so.
Congratulations, John.
It's been a long, thanks for your work, I'm sure this will be.
Anything for executive session?
No, I think is there anything in there?
John, you're on the way out right now? 2 seconds. Run out, see my work, it's right around there. Jump on that.
Right. I got an email.
Is your floor office big?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now yell at that.
That's the other thing, litigation, you have to, application, that's down, so.
You have two hands here.
I mean, I have received where
I'll see you around.
I have one with me, but I just have to take it.
It's like blue light next to us, so.
There's one where it's on, but it's got a shield.
Yeah, my name is Michelle.
And then the parking lot.
Never met another.
Well,
He was also
the governing body's been talking about it, so I think they're gonna disqualify. Because in that ad hoc committee, what the council president was there.
I really don't know anything about, I mean, those committees are not, are generally not, you know, they're not unusual. I see them in every board I represent and have for many, many years. So we haven't, I'm sorry, I'll shut
I think we
Someone like to move for adjournment?
All right.
Move, second, all in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Wow.
Yeah, we're still on television.